So a little bit weird here. I'm actually on CFB Petawawa on base, and they have a base museum, and it's not really aviation oriented per se. It's mostly base history and the units that are here, but that also involves the airborne. So I figured I'd make a video of it, throw it in here. So let's head inside, take a walk around. I'll show you some of the. I didn't take any video in the museum, but I'll show you some of the pictures I got, some of the artifacts, and the interesting stuff they have, the displays and whatnot. So let's take a look in there, and then out here, there's a whole bunch of outdoor stuff. So I'll take some pictures of that, some video out here, and we'll take a look what they got. And before I forget, my name is Sean, and this is Sean's Aviation. Now, for those who might not know, CFB Petawawa was formed in the late 1800s northwest of Ottawa, which at the time was basically unused land, mostly just logging camps and whatnot. And it was actually put there specifically because it was in the middle of nowhere. A lot of the troops that were based in South Ontario, I'm going to say from Montreal down through past Toronto into the Windsor area, that's where the vast majority of the Canadian troops were based at this time. They had a place they could go and train that was away from things. There was no cities, there was no bars, there was no women to distract them. They could go there in the summer, they could get their training done, they could go back to their units and continue on with whatever they were doing. So that's why the base was formed. And as I mentioned, the museum focuses on talking about the history of the base, the surrounding area, as well as the different units that were based there. So we'll start off by looking through some of the internal museum exhibits. So here we actually have a violin made by Ukrainian prisoners that were held in a camp nearby. This is the hat of somebody who served in the Boer War, and all of those were the missions he took part in. That's his tunic. You can actually still see what I'm assuming is blood on his uniform from the time. This is a World War I gas mask, an original gas mask. So I'd like to talk about this horse setup. You see there's a saddle and a cover blanket, and then I'll show you here the picture of the horse. And if you have the time to read this, pause it and read it, or I'll try to explain quickly here. This was the last horse in the Canadian forces. It was the last of the mounted cavalry horses. And tell a bit of a backstory here. So it will take a bit of time, so I apologize if you don't want to listen to this. I've added a chapter below. You can jump ahead. So it was 1940, and this horse was basically at the end of its life, and all of the other horses had actually been sold off to the glue factory. For those who don't know the history of horses like that, look into it. It's pretty sad. But anyways, a lot of the people who were at the base decided that that was not the way that this last horse should go, and so they petitioned and got permission, and they had a parade, and they all got out with their finest. And the horse was brushed, he was prepped, he was, his hooves were glossed, everything was done. And on the parade square, he was executed. He was taken down. He was killed. They put a single shot to his head humanely, and he was buried on base in an honored position. And a bugler actually did the last post during this process, and the person who did the bugling was actually a soldier who rode this horse in World War I, which it sounds horrible, but at the same time, it was a really honorable way for a war horse, an honest to God war horse, to be put down and to be honored by his fellow soldiers. And now that we have that sad story apart, we'll continue looking at what else they had. So here we have the quintessential, Nazi flag that was captured in Italy. Here we go into 427 Squadron. You'll see they have the picture of the crest here, and there's some memorabilia from its time. This is a modern day recreation of a nose art from a World War II bomber that flew with the unit. Here is some of that memorabilia from its post-war times, the F-104 and the Sabre, some helmets, some patches and whatnot. This is a picture of some nose art from a 427 Squadron bomber in World War II. Here we have some of the weapons, various weapons used by both units based at Petawawa, as well as the enemies that they would have fought. Really cool display. I like it. Here we have some more like trench art from Vimy Ridge and some other stuff that was done. All original pieces. This is a diorama showing how artillery would be used to fire over a ridge and take out incoming Soviet armor on the other side of it. Really neat and well done diorama. Here's the airborne, the special forces, I should say, 427 Squadron Special Forces. Here we talk about paratroopers, the airborne. They were based at Petawawa up until the time that they were disbanded. Here we have some modern examples of what paratroopers would wear with a desert camo, the forest camo, and then wrapping it up with what quintessential Canadian and Arctic camo style outfit that would be worn by modern day paratroopers. Here's another example of like a halo jump, high altitude, low observability jump. And we move on here. This is an original airdroppable Jeep from the 1950s and would have been dropped out of things like C-119 flying boxcars flown by the RCAF. This is some memorabilia from some of the units in France in the post-war years or late war years. And then we end up outside with all the vehicles. And first off, we have the Bombardier Iltis, quintessential Canadian vehicle. This is a Lynx command and reconnaissance vehicle, again operated by some of the base units. A Centurion tank. We have a Sherman tank. We move on into a Dodge manufactured ambulance. And there's a couple of other vehicles based on this Dodge frame. There's a regular old kind of side panel truck. And then we move into just like a pickup truck. And then there's also a Dodge, like a 2.5 ton truck. These were all from the World War II era, in late 1940s into 1950s. Here we have a Bombardier built off-road vehicle. It's like a tracked tank vehicle. This is a Soviet airdroppable vehicle. Interesting. This is a Ford built Jeep, basically built by Ford Canada. A very early Bombardier snowmobile, a Skidoo. Again, pretty neat. And then we move over here. These are GM trucks. These are post-war. That's your 2.5 ton Deuce and a half. You've got a dump truck. This is a fuel truck. And then you move on into a kitchen truck. This would be designed to feed soldiers in the bush. And then you move on to a recovery vehicle in order to, like a tow truck, to recover down, broken down vehicles and stuff. And then a shop truck, so they could on the fly build, fix wheels and stuff like that. Next up, we have a British designed vehicle. Again, built by General Motors Canada, but used in the post-war years. This is an interesting one. I'm going to take a bit of time to talk about this. I mentioned this in an earlier video. I believe it was the 444 Squadron video. I talked about this. This is the Honest John rocket. So this is what the Artillery Corps would have used into the 60s, 50s and 60s without artillery. The idea was you could start firing these rockets with the idea that some of these would actually be a nuclear warhead on them. So you could fire these, a few miles into enemy territory and have tactical nukes, tiny tactical level nukes that could be used. Again, not something I'd want to be involved in, but that was the idea. This, I believe, is just a little rocket launcher. I'm not entirely sure. Here we have a bridge section that engineers would use to ford rivers. Moving on, we have a Cougar armored vehicle, and then we have like an M113 APC. And then you've got another Cougar vehicle, a different style turret on this one. The first one was machine guns. This has a cannon. We move on to the Leopard tank, the Leopard 1. This is the most modern tank this museum has. And then, of course, the main reason I went to the museum is this C-47. So this ended up being used by the RAF in World War II, D-Day, Market Garden, all of that stuff. Ended up with a Canadian unit late in the war. And post-war came back to Canada with the RCAF. Flown multiple units in the post-war years all throughout Canada. And now is on display at Petawawa, painted back into its kind of World War II colors. Missing the roundels, but that is that. So I'm going to wrap it up here. And, oh, you know what? Sorry, there's one of this mobile artillery units that's parked on the side of the road. Didn't quite feel comfortable driving around the base, taking pictures of all the other tanks and stuff that are around the base. But that's the museum in a nutshell. There's so much more to see. I was there for a little over an hour, probably, just engrossed in the museum. It's not very big, but it has a lot of things to look at. And I was a little short for time. I wish I had more time to actually walk through and read, but highly recommend, if anybody is in the Petawawa area, recommend stopping in and looking at this. It's a neat little museum, really cool stuff. The security guard, I can't think of what they're called right now, commissionaire at the front of the museum was talking up the base. There's a public beach, there's public campgrounds you can access. It's a great day if you're in the Ottawa area or up the valley and you're looking for something to do. Drive to Petawawa for the day. Beautiful small town, really cool little museum. Highly, highly recommend it. So I want to wrap it up there. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And we will see you all next time.